are listening to The Bell Post. Welcome to episode 43 of The Bell Post. And I'm always surprised that we've reached this level or this number of episodes. And today we have a guest who is the Honorable Tim O'Hare, who is the county judge from Tarrant County. Your Honor, thank you so much for coming and appearing and talking to us about Tarrant County issues today.
Ken, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm ready. Fire away.
Well, I will start with, I never dreamed that when I became an attorney that county judge could mean so many different things. County judge can be, a constitutional county court judge, a county court at law judge, or as in your case, it can mean the head of the commissioner's court.
Yeah, so county judge in Texas, it's been a position that's been around forever. There's 254 counties in Texas, and the county judge back in the old days used to be kind of the be-all everything. They did probate work, they did some criminal work, then they presided over this thing called the Commissioner's Court. And for the public that doesn't know this, the Commissioner's Court is basically the city council of the county, or the legislature of the county, if you will, and the county judge presides over it. In the really large counties in Texas, certainly the 6 largest apply, and I think a few more, the county judge usually does not perform any judicial functions anymore. By law or by statute, you still could, but in the big counties in the state, the county judge is simply the chief political executive of the county government. The county government is very large, has many different tentacles, reaches into many different things. It's the DA's office, it's the sheriff's office, it's criminal courts, civil courts, probate courts. There's a lot of moving parts. There are in Tarrant County 69 elected officials, and it kind of all comes in some ways under the Commissioner's Court when it comes to budgeting and processes, policies, procedures, but each elected official is their own boss. So I am no elected official's boss, but the Commissioner's Court does have significant financial influence over pretty much every single elected official's department, employees, and budget.
A county judge who's head over the commissioner's court, I thought they did not have to be an attorney. I know you are an attorney, but that's not one of the requirements that they be an attorney. Is that correct?
No, you do not have to be an attorney. Our previous county judge was not an attorney. I'm trying to think. I think at least the last 3, none were attorneys.
But you seem to have the perfect background for this very position. You have a financial background. You are a numbers guy, and then you graduated from SMU Law School, and you seem to kind of practice for 20-something years or more, and focusing on those types of financial issues. So you just seem to be tailor-made for being the financial officer or the numbers guy for Tarrant County.
So I went to the University of Texas at Austin and graduated with a business degree. Major was finance there. And then in addition to running a law firm for a couple of decades, I also managed a real estate investment company. So I was able to do both at the same time. So numbers, they make sense to me. I can kind of see the world through numbers in a lot of ways. And finance and real estate is something that I understand, I enjoy. And it was, I think, one of the things that helped me to see how much we could cut our Tarrant County budget this year and how much we could go down on our tax rates. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but we have some really good news that people are going to see when they get their property tax bills when it comes to the property tax rates that we set on the Commissioner's Court.
Well, I have a dad who has a degree in math and even went on a summer program to MIT, and I have a brother that has a degree in math, and I always tell people I got a law degree because I just can't do math.
Who is, I got to know before we keep going, is that a picture of you back there in the back?
It is. It's a caricature that I had done when I was in Vegas after I graduated from law school. And so that was, they actually tried, I was 29 years old and they tried to throw me out off the gambling floor because they thought I looked less than 18, but I
You
was
might not have
29.
liked that then, but now I bet you're pretty glad that you got that kind of face.
Okay, well, I appreciate you saying that, but I will say the older I get, the number that people guess my age gets older as well. It's not
That's
as old as I am. It's not 62
how
yet.
it goes. That's
But
right.
but I did notice that you share something with me. You're the father of daughters. And so
I have
you have
4.
4 daughters. I have 2. One, my youngest, just went to college, and my oldest has graduated from Baylor, and she's now working at a local TV station for digital media. But I always say it's a different type of dad when you're a dad of daughters, because I'm the most competitive person there is. And if I had boys, I'd have been the worst stereotypical dad standing on the sidelines. But it's hard to be competitive when you're standing at the back of the room at the dance recital.
So I'll tell you, I played football in high school. I played through college. And when we were looking at, my wife and I both got married late in life. I didn't get married till I was 39. She was 31. And when we got married, we started looking at where are we going to raise our family. And we had, let's see, we were married. We had our first baby after we'd been married. I guess it was like 2 years and a month. And when we had her, well, when my wife Kristen was pregnant with her, is when we started looking around and to figure out, okay, where are we going to raise our family? We were drawn to Tarrant County. We were drawn in particular to Southlake, and a big chunk of that was I have a big football family. My brother played football, uncles played football. Everybody, football was what we, kind of revolved Thanksgiving around, really. And we were always a big football family. And so one of the things that attracted us to Southlake was the great tradition in football. So we thought for sure that we'd end up having a few football players. Well, 4 kids, all daughters later. We enjoy going to the games, but we're not going to have any football players. But I will tell you, when it comes to competitiveness, so I'm as competitive as you can get. And my 4 kids have kind of learned that a little bit. So they are all involved in sports. Volleyball, basketball, soccer. Even one of them started this year a flag football league for girls.
Wow.
And they're good little athletes and competitive, but it's not nearly to the same, intensity and angst as it is for guys.
Well,
So
girls can be every bit as competitive as guys. I mean, my youngest had a bone marrow transplant when she was 5. She was born with some issues and she had low platelets. But I mean, both of my parents were coaches. And so we always said growing up that my youngest daughter, was the second most competitive person in the family behind my mother, and that I was a very close third.
Yeah.
But so yeah, girls can be just as competitive, and it can be kind of fun to watch. But
here's what I've noticed: the biggest difference between the girls and the boys, if it's on a soccer field, if some boy gets hit in the face, and I mean it gets kicked with the ball or kicked, in his leg or something, it gets really hurt and goes down, that's an opportunity for the boy to take off, go around him, and go score a goal. For the girls, what we've seen so far, and my oldest is 12, if somebody gets kicked in the face real bad, the girls pause to check on them and make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
They may change that at one point. I don't know, but that's what we've seen so far out of all the girls' leagues we are in and I coach in.
Well, I was older when I got married, just like you. I spotted my wife 10 years. And so I was 36 when we got married. So I was 38 when our first was born. And I mean, it sounds like you're just like me. I mean, I have thoroughly loved being married and having girls. And I, regret not doing it earlier, but then it wouldn't have been my wife or the girls that I have. And so I absolutely love everything about being married. And I was as shy as they could be, as sheltered as you could be, but that's okay. I still, I taught high school for 2 years and I chose to be sheltered. Some of the questions you would get from kids, I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But let's kind of talk about, being the budgeting person or the purse strings, people in control of the purse strings at, the commissioner's court. Tarrant County's been going through this transition with what we call tech share. How is that going?
Well, so start with the budget piece. So what we just did in Tarrant County was we cut our budget by over $8 million from last year to this. So
where did the cuts come from?
So we nickel and dimed in a lot of places.
Mhm.
There were several departments that had jobs that we taxed. I say we, I didn't because I wasn't there. I got there January 1st, but previous courts had taxed the public for jobs that never ended up getting filled. So there were maybe a couple of hundred jobs that were unfilled regularly, but the budget kept being passed that would count those jobs in it, so you're taxed for it. Well, so one of the things we did to cut the budget was stop funding positions that we knew, were never really going to be filled. So we cut 8.1 million out of the budget from one year to the next. I bet we're the only taxing entity in Tarrant County that actually reduced their budget from one year to the next. But we did a couple of historic things that have never been done in the history of the county. The state requires all taxing entities to put out some financial information about their tax rates. And one of those is called the no new revenue rate, which would be what do you get to collect if it's the same tax somebody would have paid a year before. It's kind of a formula. It's not perfectly fitting for every single property, when there's tens of thousands of them. But we went below, and the commissioner's court, this 5-member board, which is the county judge, like the mayor of the county, then the 4 commissioners, like city council members, we cut the tax rate for the county below the no new revenue rate for the first time in the history of Tarrant County. We also set the tax rate for JPS, the hospital district. We set a tax rate equivalent to the one we passed in for the county property tax side. The same number, 19.45 cents per $100 of value. That was the first time in the history of Tarrant County that JPS's tax rate has gone below no new revenue. Then we did one other thing. The state allows for counties and hospital districts to have homestead exemptions of up to 20%. Neither Tarrant County nor JPS had ever had a homestead exemption. So this year we put 10% homestead exemption on county property taxes and JPS property taxes. The goal is to get to the full 20 next year. So if you are a homeowner, let's say your value what last year and this year are the exact same, which we know isn't happening in Tarrant County, but let's say it was, your tax savings would be about 22% this coming tax year compared to the last one. When you factor in the appraisal increases, which is likely about a 10% appraisal for most, everybody got hit pretty hard, you're still looking at somewhere between an 11 and 13% tax decrease in terms of the amount you'll pay for both the county and JPS if you're a homeowner. And my intention is to take us below no new revenue every year as long as I'm here. Now, to get to your question, that big piece that we did with the budget cuts and the homestead exemptions resulted in significant savings, money going back to the taxpayer, or really money staying in their pockets instead of the government collecting it. The tech share question you asked. So I want to say 15 years ago, could have been 18 years ago, could have been 14, but quite a few years ago, the county came up with this idea that they were going to pool with other counties in the state and create software that they could then develop, create, and then mass market and basically get all their money back. Well, it's basically the government trying to go into business. So there's a reason the government doesn't make their own automobiles, and there's a reason government doesn't own its own construction company, and there's a reason government doesn't make its own computers, is because government is not really good at business. So in my opinion, this whole tech share concept, I think, was flawed from the start, but we're many years and many millions of dollars into it. So tech share is basically the just like to say Windows is software. Well, tech share is basically a software platform, but there's multiple aspects. There's a tech share for the jail. There's tech share for juvenile detention. The most recent thing that we're talking about is tech share for the criminal court system. So there has been, this will blow some people's minds. Last month was when I last saw the numbers. I think so far the amount had been spent by Tarrant County alone on tech share was $67.5 million. And the amount of money that Tarrant County had recouped of that $67.5 million was $1.5 million. So the
Mhm.
way it was sold to the public, the way it was talked about, was never going to work, hadn't worked, will never work the way it was originally described. So now the question is, do you keep funding it with the maintenance and operations, or do you ditch it all? And do you go buy a product off the shelf or that's tailor made for you from a software company? Well, there's not a lot of software companies that do these things.
Yeah.
So we have been exploring what to do and how to do it. One of the things we did was we said we're not going to do any more development related to TechShare. They're finishing up an agenda management system, which is pretty minor in comparison to the numbers. I mean, it's a couple $100,000. Not that that's small sums of money, but compared to 67.5 million, it's pretty insignificant. So that's continued. But then after that, we have basically put a moratorium on. We're not going to be in the TechShare development, in the software development business anymore. So now we're going to make sure the software we have works, is up and running. There are meetings literally going on almost on a weekly basis on how to make it better, how to make it more efficient. And one of the things we did just by saying we're not going to do more development is that was another $1.2 million. I think it was 1.2, might have been 1.1 that we cut out of the budget for this next budget year because we're not going to be paying to develop.
Well, I know there's been a, anytime you roll out new software, there's going to be some bumps in the road in the implementation. I know that there was some bumps in the road in the implementation of the criminal justice module. Were there any other modules planned that have not been implemented so far?
So the other one that's been talked about is civil.
Okay.
Is taking over the civil system and making it civil. But it's kind of, if you let it go, well, we can create a software for this, we can create a software for that, software for this. But the whole way it was sold to the public was, we're going to be able to recoup our money back, and this is going to basically be software for free, or we're even going to profit off of it. That's just not what government is set up to do. I mean, it's just not ever going to work. So as long as I'm county judge, I'm going to do everything I can with my vote, my 1 of 5 votes, to make sure we don't open some other kind of business enterprise. But what we do with TechShare now that it's here, well, the programs that are in place, like juvenile, jail, those work well. Those have served us well. They cost way more collectively than they should cost to develop and maintain. But now that they're there, they're good programs, and we've gotten the costs down on the maintenance part. But any software you have, there's maintenance. I mean, people know they buy a license, there's maintenance.
Anytime I hear somebody say, we're going to do this and then we're going to recoup our money, I'm like, has that ever been done?
Not by government very often, no.
So, I mean, talk to me briefly about how does Tarrant County, where do they get their revenue? I mean, we know there's all types of revenue sources for cities and for the state, but how does the county get its money?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would tell you that county government funds come from all over the place. But, government's money comes from people, and it comes from businesses. So a huge chunk of it is the property taxes. Unlike cities, unlike the state, the county does not collect sales tax.
That was actually a surprise to me. I figured there was some small portion of sales tax that came to y'all. Yeah.
So if you're in a city in Tarrant County, I think every one of them, the sales tax rate is 8.25%. That's 6.25 that goes to the state, and then the 2 cents goes to the city. In some cities in North Texas, Dallas County, Collin County cities that are members of DART, Dallas Area Rapid Transit, their 2 cents for being a member of that, you have to pay 1 of your cents to the DART system. Yeah, I don't know if there are a lot of cities that are glad they did that besides Dallas. I'm not even sure Dallas is, but I can tell you for a lot of the suburbs, they wish they'd never done it. And but in Tarrant County, since we don't have that set up, the cities, 6.25 of the 8.25% sales tax goes to the state, 2 cents goes to cities. The county gets nothing in terms of sales tax. So the county does recoup fees in a variety of ways. It could be a fee for filing a lawsuit. It could be a fee for a fine on a criminal matter. It could be, there's forfeiture funds that come from, drug dealers or criminal enterprises. There's a whole host of things, but the lion's share, the big chunk comes from property taxes. But then the county receives a tremendous amount of state funding, many grants, federal funding, many grants, but we know where those come from. Those come from taxpayers
Sure.
also. Sometimes in county circles, they talk about, oh, well, this doesn't cost our taxpayers. Well, those same taxpayers pay taxes to the state, pay taxes to the federal government. So it does come from taxpayers. It may be collectively shared amongst all the states or the whole state, but it's still taxpayer money. And so I try to be just as careful with the grant money that comes from a state or the feds as I am the money that comes from property taxes. It's all someone else's money, and it needs to be watched over like a hawk, which I think is one of the things I've brought to the court in my 9 months here in office.
Well, you've mentioned, that you just came in January, and so you've been very, along with your other commissioners or the other commissioners on the county court, y'all been very, y'all have done an ambitious thing here. I don't know how someone who comes in with hits the road running in January and gets to this point. You've got to be a numbers guy to be comfortable enough to say, hey, I haven't ever been here before, but let's talk numbers and let's find where we can make cuts for the taxpayers. That
Let me
had to
tell you
be
what I have
difficult.
done.
Mm-hmm.
Let me tell you what I have done before. So I've been on a city council and I've been a mayor. I did that for 6 years. It was both, unpaid jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But so I understood walking in the door how government operates. I understand where you can find efficiencies. But when I campaigned on this, so I started campaigning, really in June of 21. The primary was March of 22. So I won the primary handily. And then in the November election, won that. But the entire time I'm running, I'm learning.
Sure.
Studying. I did not want to show up on day one and say, well, gosh, now what? I wanted to know exactly what I was getting into. Having the previous experience serving on city council and as mayor gave me a lot of experience, a lot of stuff that I didn't have to learn. I already knew what it was. I knew how the government operated in Texas, what the rules were, what the laws were. But I campaigned on significant property tax cuts. And I'll tell you what happens with local government officials far too often. We have some really good ones in Tarrant County. We have some not so good ones. And what they do, so they'll cut a tax rate. So let's say, for example, that your property is a $100,000 property, like there's hardly any of those anymore. But let's say there's a $100,000 property. And the tax rate that you have is, let's say it's 50 cents per $100 of value. Okay. So the next year you're appraised, you get the full 10% increase if you're a homeowner. Now it's 110,000. They cut your tax rate from 50 cents per 100 to 49 cents per 100. And then they run around telling everybody that they cut your taxes. Sure. But then when you actually get your tax bill, you pay more this year than you did last year. But they all told you that they cut your taxes. What I told people when I was campaigning is you will never hear me say that. You'll never hear me act like I cut your taxes. If we cut a rate, but you still paid more in taxes, that we were going to provide actual tax relief. And so instead of playing these little shell games and calling things, and I said, I'm not going to say I cut your taxes unless I did. We did. For every homeowner in Tarrant County, there is no way your Tarrant County, if you have a homestead exemption, there is no way your tax bill this year will be more than last year. It will be less.
Well, I remember I got so upset with my appraisal district probably 6 or 7 years ago because, they kept raising my value of my home that I finally protested it and had to go through that process. And, I just wasn't shy. Maybe I should be more shy about those things. But, you've already mentioned, the other elected officials are elected by the voters. And so you have great influence over their budgets. But, everybody seems to be autonomous. It seems like a lot of what you do is you're almost maybe a little bit more than a mediator, but you're really kind of trying to get two sides, the money side and the other independent people to come together to make an agreement. So, does part of the process of getting their agreement that you're going to do that, or does it not sometimes?
Well, that's a great question. So ultimately, the authority for the tax rate lies with the commissioner's court. So if you want to so do I need the sheriff's agreement to cut the tax rate? Not in the slightest. is it a good idea to work with the elected officials and find out what they think they need and look for ways to be more efficient, where if they need additional money for something, you can find a way to reduce expenditure somewhere else? Yeah. And I'll tell you, like our sheriff, for example, and our DA, great men, Sheriff Bill Wayburn,
Sure.
District Attorney Phil
He's been
Sorrells.
on our podcast.
Yeah, Phil took office the same time I did, January 1. Bill's been in there now, I think, 6 years. And we work very closely together. I talk to them regularly. And so Bill is always there to help find ways to reduce spending and still meet the needs of the sheriff's office, which of course runs the jail, but also serves as the third largest law enforcement agency in Tarrant County and has a lot of very important duties. There's a human trafficking task force that they are point on for North Texas, which has rescued hundreds of people from sex trafficking, including a 4-year-old in pretty recent times. So Phil Sorrells, you know, when somebody gets elected, they come in and they want to get their people in place in a lot of spots. Well, our DA, Phil Sorrells, has to come to commissioner's court if he wants to bring somebody in and hire them higher than the hiring rate for a position. So he was regularly coming to commissioner's court with his hires, but his hires, he was bringing them in at a lower price than the previous person was making almost every single time. I can't think of one where he wasn't. So every time there was a change in a position, it was a tax savings. And Phil is very mindful of that. And so there is a way to balance those interests in your inside your own agency. Both Phil and Bill were great to work with and very supportive of our going in there and cutting taxes. But at the end of the day, do you have to get anybody's approval to do it? No, it's the commissioner's court. And if you have 3 votes, that's what's kind of the popular saying around here. If you can find 3 votes, then you can pretty much do anything you want in the county.
You carry a big club. I mean, a big stick when you have the financial strings, but I always think that to a large extent, we're mediating a little bit because we don't want to have open warfare between elected officials, even though you have the final budget say on them. But, I think as we're talking about criminal justice issues, so much of this applies to that because, we have to find that, like you've said, the happy medium. We've got to have public safety so that our businesses can function, so that our businesses can prosper, and so that property values go up. I saw an article just today talking about 3 buildings in San Francisco that sold in the last 6 months, one for 50% of its value within the last 6 months, one for 25% of its value from 3 months ago, and another one for 66% of its value. I mean, finding that happy medium is really important for a whole lot of reasons, not just for getting everybody to work together, but public safety and getting businesses to really take off and prosper.
So I ran on 3 things.
I
ran on cutting taxes, eliminating wasteful and abusive spending. That's one. I ran on strong public safety. And I know that your podcast is not political, but it doesn't mean I can't be. We're seeing these liberal-run cities all across the country with these idiotic policies about defunding the police and, letting everybody out on bail. And then crime goes up in those cities. Well, what did you expect would happen? Of course, that was what was going to happen. So people are fleeing California. People are fleeing San Francisco. Targets are closing their doors in these cities because of all the looting. But I ran on cutting taxes, property tax relief. I ran on strong public safety. I will always support law enforcement. I will always support our DA's office. And then I ran on creating more jobs. I'm a firm believer in a rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely.
We want to have a business-friendly community, not an anti-business community. We're seeing so many people move out of California to Texas. We're seeing businesses move out of California to Texas because they have a terrible business climate. We have a strong business climate. And those are the 3 things that were really the focus of my campaign and that I talked about. And we've come in and done things to enhance those since I've been in office.
Well, as you finished, your first budget cycle, what kind of lessons were learned that you would highlight to other counties if they wanted to explore doing the very same things that you did and that you were successful in your first budget cycle? What would you highlight to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. One is set a tone from the beginning that there's going to be tax relief and we're going to reduce spending. So, and a lot of times voters start reaching out to their city councils or school boards or county government a couple of weeks before they're going to vote on the tax rate. The reality is the tax rate at that point is probably pretty darn near set.
Mm-hmm.
So the budgeting process really is all year long.
All year long.
But it really gets hot and heavy starting in March. Even though you don't vote on a tax rate, which is what the whole budget is based on, you don't vote on a tax rate until August. You take a vote, and then you take it's basically the ceiling vote, I call it, and then in September you take a final vote. So it's set a tone for property tax relief from the beginning, but B, it's also every government is guilty of this, even the ones that are run incredibly conservatively. There is waste. You cannot help but find waste in these giant entities with 69 different elected officials and multiple different departments, and look for ways to eliminate it. One of the things that we voted on, maybe my second meeting here, was we had people in public health and people in IT going to conferences. And you wouldn't believe the amount of money they were trying to have taxpayers pay for them to spend on a night's hotel. One of them, I believe the number was $570 a night at Disney World. Another one was, I think it was $490 a night. We came in, the new court, and said, we're not doing this. The taxpayers are not going to pay for government employees to go stay in $600 a night hotel rooms. This is absurd. And there's always things you can find. So look for it, be intentional, but work with your staff. Talk to them about, make it a point, let's find inefficiencies. But I'll tell you the other thing is that I learned that I would tell them. And that is, people, Republican, Democrat, independent, apolitical, they want law and order. Mm-hmm. They want strong public safety. So when you've got some people afraid if we boost the police presence or add money to the public safety budget, no, that's what they want. That is what I've always said. This government really is here to do two things. And one is to protect your God-given rights. And the second is to provide law and order and protect you, keep you safe. So that's almost every government's number one function. And don't shy away from that. People, regardless of what you hear in the media, and regardless of what some politician in Washington says, because he gets a lot of votes back home in his district that thinks closing businesses and selling them at half their value is a good thing for their community. At the end of the day, people want strong public safety. Don't be afraid of it. Stand strong on it and resist the lunacy. Your county, your city, they're depending on you.
Well, I agree with you. I think that public safety is not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. And part of the problem is we've injected politics into criminal justice reform. We need to take it out.
We inject politics into movies,
we can. We need to stop. I had a boss, my very first boss told me one time, if you take care of the pennies, the dollars take care of themselves. And that was, now that's more than 40 years ago, but I still remember it today. But I think is probably good wherever we are. It's good for your home budget. It's good for your county budget. It's good everywhere. But thank you so much for giving us your insights and telling us about the county judge and how the county commissioner's court works in Tarrant County and how it should work everywhere. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Hey, you're welcome. My honor. Call me anytime.
Thank you for listening, and come back for the next episode of The Bell Post.